Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
We all know the internet by now. I mean, it's awesome. It's terrifying. Awesome because it has unlocked this world of information for us. It's terrifying because misinformation is everywhere. And that's one of the reasons I really do love the Great Courses Plus, because it is a streaming service that provides information that I know I can trust from respected professors who really do know their stuff. Thousands of lectures in so many wonderful categories, streaming to your computer or on your phone with the Great Courses app on your schedule. Catch Dr. Richard Spence's series called The Real History of Secret Societies. Or if you like to cook, how about the fall edition of Delicious Dishes for every season? I've been enjoying Dr. Peter Vishton's series called Understanding the Secrets of Human Perception, how our senses work or how they don't work as we both perceive and participate in our world. Really helpful stuff and a great resource for people who are engaged in personal experience discussions with theists out there. Good information from a reliable source, so stop guessing. Sign up for the Great Courses Plus today. I've arranged for my listeners to get a full month of unlimited access for free. To get your free month, sign up using my special URL. Do not wait any longer. Go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/Seth. Remember, thegreatcoursesplus.com/Seth. I have a special guest that's, it's just a serendipitous convergence, this guest and the upcoming Halloween holiday. I don't know, I put the two together because when you talk about death, people always sort of associate it with this time of year and whatnot. Caitlin Doughty, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to finally get you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, the fall is definitely my most busy time of year. People seem to be more interested in talking to me in this festive autumn time.
You're like the Pope. It's like getting an audience with His Holiness. It's like, look, is Caitlin available for an interview? And they're like, well, let me look at my calendar. In 6 months, she has a window at 4 o'clock. I've been trying to land you for a while. And the reason is because I have so many members of my audience who follow your page, who love your books, who just love you. And so this is very special.
And you're like, okay, I don't know about this person.
No,
but
I totally follow. For those who aren't familiar with Caitlin's work, I'm going to ask her to kind of give the basics. But she is a host of the web series Ask a Mortician. Her work has been featured on NPR, the BBC, New Yorker, The Atlantic, the New York Times. She has authored the book Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and From Here to Eternity, as well as the new one called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? Big Questions from Tiny Mortals About Death. And there's an awesome black cat on the cover of the book. Am I not weird then for liking? It's not that I love talking about death, but I'm fascinated by it. This is common,
it's okay
right?
to love. Absolutely. It's absolutely okay to love talking about death. That's not strange. That's not morbid. And the thing is, we're not ever going to get to a place culturally, especially in the United States, most likely, or the Western world in general, where somebody dies and we're like, it's totally fine. I'm completely zen about it. Death is fine. It's normal. And I don't think we should be aiming for that place. But what I do think we should be aiming for is a culture where it's okay to acknowledge that death is in our history and our literature and our science and our culture, and that it's okay to be fascinated by it. It's okay to be fascinated by the dead bird you find on the sidewalk. It's okay to be fascinated by the way people have taken care of their dead throughout history. All of this is very normal, and you are part of a long lineage of humans who have grappled with their own mortality.
Have you always had sort of a, fascination, not obsession? Are you obsessed with death? What?
I don't know. I don't think I'm obsessed with that. I think I'm obsessed with my work, which just happens to be spreading information and public engagement around death. But I don't know. I think that most people are not as interested or obsessed with death as they should be, or they're not allowing themselves to be. I think about kids all the time, especially since I just wrote this book with kids' questions. And I think about how when you're a child, you go and you see you see an animal that's been hit by a car, or you see something on the news that's hard to take, and you ask questions because you're grappling with it and you're interested. And if the parents shut you down, if they shut down that ability to be curious about these topics, you grow up feeling like death is taboo and it's not safe to venture into those places, when in reality kids have the best ability to just be open and understand that. So I think that I personally was in that place too. I had a lot of interest in death as a child, and it became a little more pathological because I wasn't allowed to express it.
Do you feel like the United States is sort of behind the curve? A lot of cultures seem to be more enlightened. They're more open. They're less weird about death. Am I getting that wrong? Do you think the U.S. is sort of behind the curve?
Yeah, we absolutely are. And I think I would never, and I've written books about other cultures, I wouldn't feel comfortable going into another culture and saying like, oh, you're doing this wrong. But because I am a mortician and own a funeral home in the United States, I feel more than comfortable criticizing my own culture and how we handle death, because I think that there's a sort of traditional funeral industry that sucks everybody in, that sucks in different religious groups, different cultural groups, immigrant groups, and it all gets sucked into this pretty bland way of death where you're embalmed, you're chemically preserved, you're laid out in the makeup, everybody comes and awkwardly taps your hand as they walk by and then just sits down and doesn't really do much for the funeral. And I hear a lot of people saying that no longer really does much for them. That leaves them, especially younger people, it leaves them feeling alienated from the funeral experience. They don't feel like it's any way ritualistic or transformative for their grief, and they're left without much feeling. We'll probably go into this more, but that doesn't mean that we need to bring back religion to our death. There can be ritual and there can be incredibly powerful things that we do at death that have absolutely nothing to do with death or nothing to do with religion, that are entirely secular. And that's actually a big part of my advocacy as well.
I would talk a lot about, and depending on the subject of the show, we get into the wedding industry and how it's, they have this framework that you are supposed to use a traditional venue, preacher, dress, tux, candelabras, cakes, flowers, photographer, blah, blah, blah. And you get into sort of the business where it becomes this list of expectations instead of really being a personalized experience for the people involved. The same is true for funerals, is it not?
100% same for funerals. And you'll go into a funeral home. I actually recently had a family that I was helping through a nonprofit they were connected with, where these two young men lost their mother to cancer, and I believe they were immigrant family. They obviously didn't have much money, and they were having to do a GoFundMe for I think $25,000 because that is what was being quoted to them by the funeral home they went to. There is no way that a simple funeral, a simple meaningful funeral, should have cost that family $25,000. That's bonkers. What I say a lot of the time is, you should be you have to pay for the bare minimum at funerals. You have to pay for a simple cremation, a simple burial, a simple viewing, if that's what you want. And that should run you, $1,000 to $4,000, let's say. But beyond that, the things that you're paying for should be things that you want to pay for. They should be things that are meaningful to you and your family. So if you have money and you want to spend $500 on elaborate cheese plates or an Elvis cover band or a mariachi band, or alcohol or whatever is meaningful for you, that's what you should be paying money for. You shouldn't be paying money for things just because the funeral home says they're on the list of things you should be paying for. It's
funny. I think of that scene in Big Lebowski where Donnie died and they were at the funeral home and he's like, it's our most modestly priced receptacle. And it was like a $300 urn. And they're like, what are you shitting me? I mean, give me a Folgers can. Let's do that, right? I mean, after a while, it just becomes about Well, it's supposed to be expensive, and if you don't pay a lot of money, then maybe you don't really care.
Right, which is ludicrous, and that's been a problem for a long time because we feel uncomfortable as a society price shopping for funerals, right? Like if you're going to buy a new car, you would almost be a fool to walk into the Lexus dealership and just walk out with a full price car. People would say, "What's wrong with you? Why did you do that?" But we do not feel comfortable calling around, asking for prices, understanding what our rights are with prices around funerals because we think that's somehow disrespectful. But I do think that's changing. I think a lot of people now are saying, if you don't price shop for my funeral, that goes against who I was in life. You know, my mother would never be comfortable with me just blindly shelling out $10,000 for a funeral, especially if I ended up with a lot of things that weren't particularly meaningful to her in the process.
We are going to jump into the book here in just a second. Will my cat eat my eyeballs? Big questions from tiny mortals about death. But first, let me jump over to the switchboard real fast. Area code 773. You're on with Caitlin Doughty. Who's this?
This is Al.
Al, thanks for calling. What do you have for us?
Kind of a comment. I grew up in a neighborhood where death wasn't expected to be this graceful, peaceful way to go. In any sense. I mean, we could only be okay with death if the person didn't die in our neighborhood. Like, we didn't want them to be stuck in that place. It was a rough area. So I spent a lot of time trying to escape that fate. And now that I'm out of there and have been out of there, my view of death has been so skewed from the norm. And becoming an atheist has made it a little bit trickier to see death as more than just, I don't know, the loss. It's hard for it to be more than simply a failure on the part of the person. I don't know if that makes sense, but I wonder how to get rid of the fear or the preoccupation with sort of the survivor's guilt, the fact that so many neighbors didn't make it. And why should I have made it? And all those things. I think religion makes it so cookie cutter easy. And as an atheist, it's a lot trickier to get out of a mindset like mine. Have you encountered, either of you, anything similar to that?
That's a fantastic question, and there's so many things to unpack there. First of all, I'm sorry that was your experience when you were younger, and that really does your brain is fundamentally shaped by what kinds of traumas and your relationship with death is when you're a child. And I completely understand that you're still in a place now where you're like, we all die and it's all shitty and here we are. Like I completely understand that. And I think that atheism I think that we're not, frankly, doing a really good job helping secular people have ritual around death, because there's this almost dichotomy of, okay, if you have a religious, isn't that a great, do not pass go fun free card to say, okay, I know exactly how I'm going to memorialize this person. I know exactly how I'm going to bury this person. I know exactly where they're going into some other world. I know exactly what that transition is going to look like. I know I'm going to come back exactly 6 months later and have a ritual on their gravesite. Like, there's so many just things to do when someone dies, and those things to do are so crucial. And what we don't do particularly well in secular communities is give people things to do, because even if there's no religion at all connected to it or spirituality, it's so important to still do things. And that's part of my advocacy, is to make sure that people have those things to do, whether it's just sitting with the dead body for a longer time to truly understand that this person has left the building, and holding their hand, even dressing them. We help people, do their mom's makeup or do their mom's hair. That could mean being there for the cremation, actually loading the person into the machine and pushing the button, giving them a sense that they are actually sending the person off into their fiery grave. We have situations where people will make death masks in the funeral home, where people will do memorial services with telling stories, just things to do, tasks to do, because that's what gets us really tuned into the fact that death is real, it has happened, and our community is changing. And those are things that we see in religions, but they don't have to be connected to religion, and they're still incredibly valuable, because if you just get the cremation and you never see dad again, or the body just disappears and you never have any connection with it, that is not healing. The healing doesn't happen there. And so I think we can all be doing a better job at having this exact conversation that you bring up, is to how do we find meaning and ritual in a very secular or atheist death? It
does speak to what a lot of the folks from my neighborhood don't do, with or without religion. They don't get a chance to see anything that can be done, except a T-shirt that's got their face or the date, R.I.P., flowers. It's like they don't get to grieve really as much as they should. I think that really does matter a lot.
It does matter. And there's, we think about this a lot when we're talking. So we have a movement that's called death positive. And we have to be really clear that what that means is not like if you grew up in a neighborhood plagued by violence, or if you're in a community plagued by violence, that you're really positive about all the death that's around you. That's not what it's about. It's about opening up the conversation to the point that we are acknowledging these things, acknowledging all the inequalities and all the issues in death right now. And part of what is very important is the voices of the people in that actual community. And of course, it's not anyone's job to become an advocate or a job to speak out about the death that they're seeing, or the lack of ritual around the death that they're seeing, or what it's like in their neighborhood, but it can be helpful and it can be healing for those people to speak out and to create art or create advocacy or activism around that, because that is a way to heal, in a way, is to tell the story and to present it to other people in a way that they can understand.
I got to move on, my friend. Thank you so much for a great call. Much appreciated.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you, sir.
Take care. It's an interesting thing you bring up. One of the objections I hear to cremation is because there's not a physical body, there's not something for people to latch onto. It's like they never really got a chance to get that. I hate the word closure, Caitlin. I hate the word because I say it and it just sounds like a freaking Lifetime movie. But you know what I mean? Like, if they're cremated, then we don't bury them and I don't get the finality. I don't know. Do you run into that as a mortician?
Sure. Well, I think closure is not a great word, because what we're really talking about is just the start of the grieving process. Closure is not a real thing. You will still, if someone you love very much dies, you will be feeling that grief 10 months from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Like, it never entirely goes away. So what we're talking about doing when someone dies is doing the best we can to kickstart that grieving journey in a healthy way. And closure of all the grief is not the goal and shouldn't be the goal. But with cremation, I think that I am someone who strongly advocates for spending some time with the dead body. And I don't mean by that you have to pay the funeral home to embalm and put on the makeup and the suit and buy a $6,000 casket for the body to go in. I'm just saying, if you're at the hospice, if you're at the nursing home, if someone dies in your own home, just hang out with them for a little while. Sit with the body and until something shifts for you. And there'll be a moment, even if you're getting a cremation, which is the least expensive option for most people in death, even if that's all you wanted, or that's all dad wanted, or that's all your wife wanted, as you sit there with the body, there will be a time where you say to yourself, I think I'm done here. I think I've had this shift, and everyone describes it this way, that something shifts in them and they realize that dad or mom really is gone and something has happened and they've left the building, and if, most atheists don't believe that they've gone anywhere, but they aren't there anymore. They aren't with the body. And that is the moment where you can feel more empowered to say, okay, take the body away, whether it's to a cremation, whether it's to a burial, wherever it's going, it's now emotionally safe for that body to leave me.
You mentioned in the call something about giving people the opportunity to be there to help introduce the body in the crematory. I mean, you do that?
We do that. Yeah, we call it a witness cremation. Anywhere you go, we'll call it a witness cremation. Huh. And what that usually is you're not there, raking the bones out of the cremation machine. What it means is that the cremation machine opens and it's a brick-lined chamber. And you and your family can stand on either side of the simple cremation casket and push the person into the machine. And then the door comes down, and usually if you ask, they will let you press the button to start the process. And you can hear the flames start. And it's difficult, but in Hindu cultures, they have open air pyres, and it's usually the oldest son who will light the pyre of his father or his mother. And that, again, is a ritual that can be very powerful, and another ritual that does not have to be connected to religion at all. It's just saying, okay, you've moved on. I am starting the flames to send you off. And I think that it's an incredibly powerful thing that you can do when someone dies.
Kind of the equivalent of sort of shoveling in that one shovel full of dirt when the casket goes into the ground. Exactly.
Yeah. And again, that's when people we advocate for natural burial, which is a very simple, it's not 6 feet down with a big vault and a big casket and the chemically embalmed body. It's just your body going straight into the earth. And we want people to be involved in that. We want people to help load the shrouded body down into the grave. We want people to shovel the dirt back on because, again, it's giving them things to do. It's giving them tasks to do. And I think the idea of green burial is actually incredibly helpful for the atheist paradigm because your atoms are going back into the earth. You have an immortality that is not connected to religion. It's connected to my atoms were borrowed for me to live as a human in this universe. And now I'm giving my atoms back through natural decomposition. I'm going back into the earth. And it's almost like an environmental immortality.
In our kids say the darndest things sort of category, this is from the book. One of the young people who had asked a question asked, and this is actually an interesting question. Logistically, what happens if you swallow a bag of popcorn before you're cremated? You got that question and answered it. Tell me about that.
Right. So there was this meme that was going around for quite some time that said something to the effect of, right before I die, I'm going to swallow a bag of popcorn, and then my cremation is going to be epic. And I think, which is a funny meme, but I think that their idea, I think they pictured themselves just like being set on fire, and all of a sudden their chest bursts open and popcorn fills the cremation chamber. But what I had to sort of debunk with that question is the fact that those cremation chambers are 1800 degrees. They are real hot. They're very intense. There's a roar of the machine that it's doing its work, and you wouldn't hear the popcorn popping. All those popcorn kernels in your stomach wouldn't be ideal to pop anyway. They wouldn't pop, and even if they did, they'd be blast furnaced out of there with any second. So this idea of this, elegant overflow of popcorn, like a senior prank putting soap in the fountain and like, oh no, we've overflowed the school, is not actually what's going to happen here. So a lot of my questions are sort of like debunkings, but they're debunkings that I find important, as a pedantic mortician. I'm like, well, actually, this is, we need to know about a Viking funeral is,
And you covered the Viking funeral. I mean, you say, my grandma wants a Viking funeral. What can I do? And of course, that's a great question. I mean, how much control over we have in regard to the way that we are sent off. I mean, if somebody wanted to put me on the ship and light it on fire and send it off into the abyss kind of deal, can you do that?
This is the thing, is that we actually have so much more control over our dead than we think we do, and also so much less control. And this is a line that I'm always walking, because people think that the dead body is dangerous and that you can't spend much time with it, or that they can't be there for the cremation, or that they can't shovel the dirt in at the burial. And you actually can do all of those things. You're completely empowered as the close family member to be involved and to do all those things. But when you run into more problems is when you have people who want to do different things. So The burial permit in California, where I work, it says, okay, you get to cremate a body, you get to bury a body, or you get to donate a body to science. And those are basically the three categories. So when you have people who want to keep dad's skull on the shelf, or you want to taxidermy dad, or you want to have grandma have a Viking funeral, all these things, you can't really do legally. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying although I do agree with the Viking funeral one, because it doesn't really work. It's a Hollywood invention of what the Vikings do. It's not actually what they did historically. And they want you to send the flaming arrow out and cremate the body on the boat, but the wood is going to burn much faster than the body. So you're just going to have a half-charred body floating around your local waterway, which some kid is going to find it washed up on the beach. It's not going to be a good scene. So even if you could legally have the Viking funeral, I wouldn't recommend it.
There is a reason that the Washington Post has said this is a trustworthy guide through the repulsive and wondrous world of death. Doughty keeps us laughing. You cover some good stuff in here, even as you occasionally kill my childhood by saying I can't have popcorn in my stomach.
I know. I'm sort of a dream crusher, but I hope that puts everyone on the path to the realistic death vision, and then we can get And the thing is that we have so many exciting things that are happening in death. We have human composting, which was just legalized in Washington State. Nobody ever thought that was. I mean, obviously the person who started it believed it was going to be legalized, and I believed it was going to be legalized, but nobody had any idea it would happen this quickly. And we're legalizing water cremation and new death technologies all over the country. Like it's not that we don't have anything interesting coming up in death. We have all of these fascinating things that are happening. They just may not be exactly the things that you want from your childhood dreams. But don't be discouraged.
I'm going to have to go and Google water cremation. Those are two words I just didn't. 716, you're on the switchboard. Hi, thanks for waiting on us. You're on with Caitlin Doughty. Who's this?
This is Claire from Buffalo. I am so excited. I have loved your podcast for years and years and years. So, Caitlin, a couple things. I did get to sit with my mom's corpse, hospice death. She died at home. I gathered all of her clothes, put them in a bag, put them at the end of the bed, waited for the morticians to show up, and I think it actually was a good thing to do. Now, when I die, to try to keep the costs down, we have a local medical school, and apparently it's very, very low cost to donate your body, although I believe that whoever gets my corpse will be extremely disappointed because I've had 9 major abdominal surgeries, and, she's going to open it up and say, "Professor, this corpse is defective. Half the internal organs are missing."
Surprise.
Yeah. One more thing. I've heard that once the food bowl is empty, your cat's going to go after you within 24 hours, but your dog gives you 2 to 3 days of respect. Is that true?
I have to know this. I'm so glad you asked. If I die in the house, is my dog or cat going to eat me? I need to know.
Fortunately, I have answers for all these questions. First of all, I think that donating to science is a great idea, and frankly, it's a great atheist idea, because just like I said, green burial is another type of environmental immortality. Giving your body to science is immortality in a different way. It's being useful and helpful after you die. But the only thing that you have to be careful of is that sometimes they do reject people. I'm not saying they're going to reject you. I think that you probably have a fabulous corpse, but they will reject people for having too much of a type of disease or even being too overweight, frankly. There are all sorts of reasons for them to reject a dead body, so have a low-cost cremation backup plan in place if for some reason they don't take care of it. But they actually, bodies that have had interesting surgeries or have interesting or rare conditions, some places actually really like those bodies because they're a very specific example that they get to study and teach people what to look for. So, best of luck in that journey for you. I hope you don't need it for a while. And as far as your cat or dog eating you after death, they will. Absolutely. If you do not feed them and the only food turns out to be you, they will eventually, it's not a 24-hour thing or a 2 to 3 day thing. It sort of depends on what kind of animal they are. But I will say that cats and dogs generally have slightly different motivations for eating you. They've found that with dogs, the dogs usually begin to eat you out of extreme anxiety. They have more of a emotional relationship with you and your needs. And when you do not respond for days, they start nipping at you, they start tearing at you, they're trying to get you to wake up and engage with them. And when you don't do that, they almost start doing it out of anxiety, where cats, of course, we can't know what they're thinking, but they do tend to, go right into the soft parts of your face and get their meal.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your nice words.
Appreciate it. That's also an alternative book title, The Soft Parts of Your Face.
Yeah, The Soft Parts of Your Face. That sort of sounds like a romance novel as well, which would be a surprise for people who pick it up.
Another question from one of the young ones who had sent you a query was, what happens if you're too tall to fit inside the casket? Now, look, I've seen Tales from the Crypt, where they saw the guy at the ankles to squeeze him into the casket on the cheap. Look, what do they do when there's a guy who comes in who's too tall to fit in the box?
I was ready to open that question with, listen, that never happens. And then I found a story from 10 years ago when it did actually happen. I believe it was in South Carolina. And some worker at a funeral home just sawed off someone's legs with an electric saw to make them fit in a casket, which is bonkers because that's completely unnecessary.
Is it legal? Can you do that?
No.
Okay.
You cannot do it. All right. Absolutely not. No. Even if the wife came in and said, please saw off my beloved's leg, we still couldn't do it because of laws called desecration of corpse laws, which say that basically you cannot, unless you're you're doing scientific research or you have the special license, we can't just be hacking off body parts of the dead body, which is the same reason you can't just have dad's skull on your mantelpiece. We can't bringing him to a funeral home and decapitating dad is not something that we are allowed to do. That's not in our legal purview.
So there's a whole body of law wrapped around what you cannot do with the body after it's
a whole body of law, if you will.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. It's I actually have a friend named Tanya Marsh who is an incredible resource for me because she is really the expert on human remains law in the United States. And she is just a wealth of information of all of these micro laws, state by state, that you wouldn't even consider unless you were a corpse geek like myself. And so with big caskets, they make oversized caskets. They make caskets that are longer, and even a normal casket is usually much longer than, even if you're 6'9", 6'10", you can take out some of the stuffing and make it bigger and make the person fit. Once you get over 7 feet, you're probably talking about ordering a custom casket that is longer. But what I always tell people who are either very, very tall or very, very large, over 400 pounds, just be prepared in advance that you're probably going to have to make certain accommodations. You're having a larger casket, having a longer casket, having a longer or larger burial plot. That's just going to be a part of your death plan. And, funeral homes should be able to work with you to get you buried without sawing your legs off.
Stand by, my friends, because I'm about to ask Caitlin Doughty about the body farms. Oh, I'm just fascinated by these things. We're going to do that, some listener calls, whatever else comes up. It's more with Caitlin Doughty on the other side of this. Hang on. Let me tell you about a secret weapon for learning new things, because it's often hard to find time to sit down to read. Sometimes we don't have the scheduled bandwidth for a 12-hour audiobook. Well, there's an incredible app that solves this problem, and I just love it. It's called Blinkist. Blinkist works everywhere. Your phone, your tablet, your browser. It takes the best key takeaways and need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books and condenses them down to about 15 minutes, whether you're reading or listening to the audio version, during a commute, while you're working out, on your lunch break, whatever. I just finished Adam Rutherford's A Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived, talking about the story of us, humankind, as told through genetics and in a way that non-scientists can understand and enjoy. Another great option is Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, examining structure, habits, both good and bad, and how they affect our everyday lives. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books, all the books you want for one low price. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Seth to try it free for 7 days and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Seth to start your free 7-day trial. And you'll also save 25% off, but only when you sign up at Blinkist.com/Seth. You want a commercial-free show? You want to get the show 2 days early? Become a patron at patreon.com/Seth Andrews. I'm talking here with Caitlin Doughty. She is a mortician. She is the host of Ask a Mortician. She's got a brand new book out. It's called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? Big Questions from Tiny Mortals About Death. Got my hard copy right here in my hands as we're doing the interview. Area code 281. Thanks for your patience. You're on with Caitlin Doughty. Who's this?
Hi, this is Robin.
Robin, what's up? What's on your mind?
Caitlin, thank you so much for the work that you do. I wanted to have the opportunity to thank you personally. I've been a fan of yours and a member of the Order of the Good Death for quite a while now. And in July of last year, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he died in December. And I was one of his primary caretakers, and I was with him when he died, and I got to sit with him for what ended up being 5 hours after his death, waiting for the funeral home to come. And it was because of what I learned from you gave me the strength and the knowledge to get through that and to, sorry, I'm going to choke out, to be able to deal with that. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you.
It was amazing. It was an amazing experience, and I'm looking at the messages online. A lot of people are saying how they wouldn't be able to do that. I don't ever think that you couldn't, because it was a great sense of closure. So again, thank you. But I suppose my question is, because of what I went through with my dad, I've decided to go ahead and make funeral arrangements for myself, even though I'm 49. I'm donating my body to the forensics department at Texas State University. I live in Texas. It's the closest place to me. But are there other forensic departments, the body farm in Tennessee, or other ones that you can say are better than the other? Because I know several of the people on the Facebook page are asking about forensics departments. Just wonder if you could touch on that. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot to me, and I'm so glad that you were able to do that, and that you had the strength and the peace of mind to go do it and come out the other side. And I know that your dad would have appreciated it, and that's just fantastic. So and now back to forensics, your body donating to forensics. I believe that there are 6 currently operating in the United States, and I know that there is one that just opened in Canada as well. I think that I don't think that one of them is better than the others. Some may have different reputations or specialities. I believe the one in Texas, is it the one in San Marcos that you're donating to? Yeah, I'm especially interested in that one because they do lots of experiments with vultures, which is how I personally would like to be.
Right.
Well, if I can jump in very quickly, forgive the interruption, but for those who are listening going, what the hell is a body farm?
Okay, you're right.
You kind of spell it out, and because they heard vultures, and they're like, what are we doing here? So what is it?
Yeah, we're talking about most people have probably heard of the idea of a body farm, and they usually call the real, more technical name is a human decomposition facility. And what these are, they're connected usually to a university, and they're research facilities where if you donate your body, you can donate your body to a medical school, and that will be used to do dissections and to train physicians. But if you donate to one of these forensic research facilities, what they're learning is all sorts of things that are still very unknown about the frontiers of forensics. They'll use your body and they'll say, okay, if you wear a shirt and a t-shirt and it's this type of weather and you're 1 foot under the ground, or your body's in a tree, or your body's in the back of a pickup truck, what does that do with insects? What does that do with decomposition? And they can learn things so they can solve crimes. They can learn things about anthropology. They can learn things about how bodies decay. So it's a really useful service for them to actually have real human bodies available to do these kind of tests on, because there's so much that we actually don't know about forensics. When you watch a forensic show, you have somebody who's like, doctor, I see that she died exactly at 11:32 p.m. When in reality, a forensic pathologist friend of mine said the only way you can know when someone died is if they were shot in the watch. Because that science is still so far away from us really understanding it. So by donating your body to these research centers, you can do your part in expanding that field of research. And the one at San Marcos is so fascinating to me because they do a lot of experiments with vultures. And we did a big video about immigrants coming and migrants coming across the border from Mexico, and what happens in the desert and how quickly those bodies can just disappear. You think of deserts mummifying bodies, but actually because of vultures, because of animals in the desert, those bodies can just disappear, not to be found again, and which is kind of a scary thought. And so this research is actually very important right now as well. So I think that's fantastic that you're doing that.
It's not unlike the sky burial, right? Where they prepare the body and drag it up, and then they sort of return you as nourishment to the animal kingdom kind of deal, right? Exactly.
Yeah. The department, the forensics department, after they finish with your body, the one at San Marcos, they donate your bones to their forensics art department as well. So your skull, and I had to send them whole bunches of pictures throughout my life so that they will be able to find out if their artists are being properly trained for the forensics art as well. So that's another thing that college does.
Yeah, that's fantastic. They do in the one that I visited in at Western Carolina. They have all of these bones, and they also. She worked with cadaver dogs who are trained to find dead bodies in the woods or when people go missing. And she would train the dogs with the bodies, and then they would send them home with vials of dirt from under a dead body that the dog could continue to learn the smell of a dead body and how to pick it up. So there's all sorts of fascinating things that these programs are doing.
There's a line from a James Bond film that says something like, just because you're dead doesn't mean you can't be useful. Maybe there's some truth to that.
There you go.
Hey, thanks so much for a great call. Appreciate you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Caitlin, you got time to take one more before I let you go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Pawed at by people all over the place, but I've got you.
Bring it on. Bring me
advantage.
A call.
234. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast with Caitlin Doughty. Who's this?
Hi, Seth and Caitlin. My name is Lauren. I have been a longtime fan of both of you guys.
Thank you.
And so I was really excited when I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw your two pictures side by side. And as I was waiting to talk to you guys, I was noticing you both touched on in different times. I'm very much into the green burials, especially the alkaline cremation or the water cremation that Seth was confused about. And I also being familiar with some of the other videos talking about how there are legislators that have a hand in the funeral industry, and they're trying to push laws in those states that kind of make it harder for people to have more of that control over the body. And I was trying to combine those two things. It's like, in my state, those things aren't available yet. And I know having the talk with people about what these are and how they're really respectful and what they, the impact on the environment, all those things. And, I've written emails to legislators, but how do we bring that more to the forefront so those alternative options that I've been loving so much are available for when my time comes?
Yeah, and they will be. I think they will be. I think we're moving in that direction. I think water cremation or aquamation is now legal in 20 states, and that's going to keep going across. Once the main pins are knocked down, it's just going to keep going. And I'll explain it very briefly because I know that you're wondering about it. Basically, it's instead of dissolving the body through high temperatures like cremation, you're dissolving the body through water and potassium hydroxide, high heat water and potassium hydroxide. And the end product is basically the same thing. It's ashes. It's just a process that is a little more environmentally friendly. And some people just like the idea of dissolving in water rather than dissolving in fire, and kind of a personal preference. And the reason that it's working, I say this all the time, is that these laws make very strange bedfellows out of very liberal hippies and libertarians, because they come together around this idea of, yes, they should be environmentally friendly options, but also that the government shouldn't have a direct say in what people want to do with their dead bodies. So there shouldn't be a government mandate that these two, a cremation and a water cremation, are not that different. They've both been tested. They both have the same end product. So the idea that it's the government's job to protect the citizens from this terrible new way of disposition is just silly. And the fact is that it's all about exposure. I found this headline from I think it was the Chicago Tribune from the 80s, and this was when cremation was still at like 3%, I think, in the United States. And the headline was like grisly tales discourage cremation, or thinking about cremation, you shouldn't do it because it's horrifying. And that is sort of what we're seeing now with this water cremation, the idea of like, oh, you're flushing grandpa down the drain, the horror of a water cremation. And it's just not true. And I think it is about time. That was 3% cremation rate in the 80s. We're now at over 50%. If you ask most people, they're going to, especially people in probably the circles we run in, they're going to say, yeah, I'm probably going to be cremated. It's less expensive. It's the more environmentally friendly thing to do. It just makes sense for me. And we can create those narratives around things that are even better, that are even potentially less expensive and even better for the environment. We can keep pushing those narratives and letting people make those choices. And it's just going to take time. I think in any type of death work that you're doing, because death is so threatening to people on its face, it's going to be you're playing the long game. It's not going to be easy. But I think that if we continue to explain to our Congress people or our assembly people, whoever it is in your state that's voting on it, that you want this because you want more options, that it's been thoroughly tested, that it helps working class families, that it helps, environmental policy, it brings jobs into the state, that it's a positive thing. I think that we will break those barriers and people will be as comfortable with these new options as they now are with cremation.
Yeah, because I never really thought of the job industry aspect of it, because in Ohio especially, they're constantly going so worried about jobs. So kind of like maybe when I go to functions and talk to legislators, I can bring that part in so they can kind of
absolutely. Let's start manufacturing alkaline hydrolysis machines right here in Ohio. And I think that currently, I can't remember, one of our alkaline hydrolysis manufacturers is in the Midwest. I can't remember what state it is, but it's already there. It's already doing that. It's already creating that for people. So I think that there's a lot of reasons. And the easy answer is there's absolutely no reason that it shouldn't be legalized. But of course, that's not the most effective thing to bring to a lawmaker. But, just thinking about what in California, I wrote a letter to Jerry Brown, our governor, and said, I know that you're really concerned about climate change. I know that you're concerned about the environment. And this is a decision that someone who is concerned about climate change and the environment would make, to sign off on this bill and approve it for California. And it will be legalized next year in California. So thinking about what people in your state, what their particular their particular concerns are, or how they see themselves, what they see themselves as a warrior for, and playing that into what you're advocating for is, I think, always the best option.
Thank you so much for the call. I greatly appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
You guys have a good day. Bye.
All right. Take care. Caitlin, give me a final slug here for this book. I mean, I'm going to pitch it because it's fun. Because, look, what I really like about you is that you demystify this sort of taboo. They rarely will show a dead body on like a newscast. There's a body. Is it almost dead or is it actually dead? Because if it's actually dead, we can't show it. And I think to myself, this is sort of where we are as a culture. Don't touch, don't look. It's taboo. It's one of those things. And you demystify. And as we've heard in the calls already in the show today, you help people, right? By bringing down those taboos and reminding them that it's okay and giving them tools for processing grief, blah, blah, blah. You are helping people. So, I mean, that's, I think, what this book helps to do as well. Is it targeted to kids or their parents or both?
It's definitely both. I think that it's not for young kids. I think that if you have a very precocious 11-year-old, 12-year-old, I think they'd enjoy it too. But the idea more than anything was to create a language for parents to talk to kids or just play to the inner kid in you, because most of us were fascinated by death when we were kids, and then we were told that it was morbid, that it was weird, that we shouldn't celebrate it, that we shouldn't celebrate our interest in it. And that means a lot of us grew up without the vocabulary to really have these conversations. So whether you're just having a conversation with yourself about death, whether you have children that you're having a conversation with, whether it's the children themselves, we're all sort of on the same level culturally with our fear of death. And I think having that kind of just open, kind of funny, kind of honest conversation about these very specific questions that kids asked, I'd like to think that it benefits everyone.
Fantastic. Will my cat eat my eyeballs? Big questions from tiny mortals about death. Caitlin Doughty. I will put the link for this in the description box of the broadcast. It has been such a pleasure hanging out with you. You are a fantastic interview. It's almost like you've been doing this for years and years.
It's almost like you've been doing this for years. Yeah, this was really fun. Thank you for having me. I'm glad it finally worked out time-wise.
You bet.
Now we're here together, and you have a great audience.
You bet. Well, thanks again, and we'll follow your work from Twitter and your website. I'll make sure those links are all in there, and thanks again.
Fantastic. Have a good day, everyone.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming Free Thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.